right, good morning. Work, can you hear me? Good. All right. Okay, so again, I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I've been working with the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership since 2009 or late 2008. And I'll talk a little bit about what I've been working on related to how we look at these shorelines. You know, Brian's been kind of transitioning into what I've been going to be talking about, and give you a little bit of a perspective. In Michigan, we have 11,000 inland lakes that are 5 acres or more. So that means that we have an incredible amount of water resources that are within our interior part of Michigan, beyond the Great Lakes. Great Lakes get a lot of attention. What we don't realize is like how many inland lakes we actually have. What we found is in 2007, their first ever national lake assessment in combination with the Environmental Protection Agency in the states was conducted. And then another one in 2012. What we found across the country and in Michigan, what we have is our inland lake shorelines. The number one threat is loss of that nearshore habitat. So 50% of our inland lakes have poor nearshore habitat conditions. And that's kind of a combination of loss of in-lake habitat, the vegetation, looking at the human impacts, the seawalls, and then what's going on the land as well. And in combination and comparison to what's going on with our nutrients in Michigan. Only about 8 to 10% actually have nutrient issues. So what that's telling us is that there's something going on with the lakes that we need to pay attention to. And that's the habitat area. To give a little perspective on DNR, has a status and trends lakes throughout the state. And when you start getting above 30% hardened shorelines, that is considered high impact. Low impact is only at 0.6%. When you start looking at that and you start seeing the impacts overall from the ecological health is pretty low percentage. And of course, you know, you're looking at the lower part of Michigan has the most intensive hardened shorelines. And as you go further north, it gets less and less. But not in all cases. So just kind of bringing you back to thinking about that, what's going on in your community and what's going on with your lakes. Over time, Wisconsin has been doing some of the studies that we use to help tell our story about what's happening with our lakes and to give you a better idea than picturing what's going on. When they started looking at from back in the 50s and the 40s all the way into the 90s and what's happened to our vegetation. The tree canopy from an undeveloped standpoint to a developed standpoint. And there's been a fairly good impact. That, although it's not as distinctive impact as your shrub layer. You know, Brian mentioned that, you know, the shrubs have an incredibly resilient root structure. And so those shrub layers are almost gone around inland lakes. And that takes away a lot of habitat, and it takes away a lot of that resilient structure to maintain those shorelines in place. Additionally, you're looking at what happens to our aquatic plants. Those nearshore areas where people consider, oh, let's get rid of the weeds. And if you learn nothing else about what's happening, is that when you start using the word weeds, people have this impression of like, it's not supposed to be there. So we're trying to change this paradigm of what we want to say is that they are aquatic plants and they are supposed to be there. The aquatic plants over time have had incredibly significant reduction. So also taking away the resiliency, that wave energy reduction and absorption also takes away the habitat. So you're losing that resiliency of the overall lake ecosystem. It's not just fish, it's the fish food, it's the frogs, it's the salamanders that need those areas, the turtles that need these areas, and it's the animals that live on the land that come into those areas to feed as well. So you're breaking down your system by taking away all of these plants in the lake and on the shore. The other thing that they found was they did a study on about frogs. What they found at the density of about 30 homes per square mile, looking at all the impacts that are happening, they lost green frogs completely in the lake. It's a pretty significant change. The other thing that they found was that not only are you losing your ecosystem, your critters out there, but it increases your runoff. The stormwater runoff, it changes your hydrologic system as well. And as that more water is running off the land, it's picking up more sediment and it's picking up more phosphorus. And you're also having these incredibly green lawns, so it's bringing a lot of phosphorus, additional phosphorus, unnatural into the system. The other thing that would be included in this calculation is that, back in the 40s, most of these lake houses had septic systems that were only used during the summer times and not necessarily every day. What's been changing is that more of these lake homes are becoming year-round, and there's more intensity around the lake as well. So it's not just a few houses, a few cabins. They're packed in there, and they're all on septic systems. The other thing that happens is you're taking away the habitat for all of the natural birds and other critters that live there, but you're also creating an incredibly welcoming system for Canada geese. It's pretty much the number one complaint that we hear is like, how do you get rid of the geese? Well, when you have an incredibly open, green lawn, geese come there because their natural history is that they're grazers. So it's like a smorgasbord for them. And there are no predators. So there's nothing to be hiding around. So no fox, no other predators for their goslings. So they're gonna go to these places where it's safe and they have an all-night, 24/7 smorgasbord for them. Brian started, we were talking about, well, how do you reestablish and how do you get rid of the geese? It's like, well, once you start reestablishing and losing some of your lawn, they're going to go to your neighbor's lawn. And it's happened. I've talked to people where it's like, yeah, I don't have a goose problem anymore. So this brings me back to the Shoreline Partnership and talking about looking at all these impacts and all these challenges. How do we reestablish this resiliency of the lake? How do we bring in the human impacts? How do we bring in the social, address the social ideas and this culture change of people coming out to the lake, tearing out all the vegetation and creating a big lawn? And how do we recreate a more stable shoreline? Because as the video showed earlier, it's like once you start putting in a seawall, more seawalls grow because the impacts on your neighbors. So the Shoreline Partnership looks at it from a comprehensive approach and looking at 4 objectives. One, we train contractors out there how to do this work. We also have to have the interested property owners. And these two are combined because if you have property owners that are interested in doing this, but you don't have contractors that know how to do it, we could talk to her blue in the face and we're not going to find success. So we combine these 2 aspects. We also are looking at what are the techniques that work out there. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not this is going to work on every site. It's very site-specific, and what is that site telling us based on the techniques that we know? And so we're always trying to look at, it's like, how do we look at these things? And we're trying to figure out how do we get that message out as well. And then from a Michigan standpoint too, what are those policies that we need to change and that we need to educate people about at the state level and at the local level in order to help create encourage more shorelines to be more natural and also to prevent that as well. But I'm mostly going to focus now on this homeowner aspect. One of the main things that we've done and we've been able to create is it's called the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program. It's an online survey for homeowners around the state to be able to take a survey and assess their own property. It's free for everybody, and we do have an option for people to take it anonymously, but we encourage people to actually register because the information is saved and you get more information, more benefit out of that. The other thing that we wanted to do is create this whole statewide system that creates more commonality across the state and creates standards. There were a lot of different lake associations that were trying to create their own program, and one was just like, it wasn't sustainable because you have a few volunteers working on it, and once those volunteers go by the wayside, the program falls apart. Or between lakes, they don't have the same kind of criteria. So how do you create these standards? And so that was one of the things that we've been able to do is we created standards, and also we're trying to push that envelope of what we want to see. Because that's one of the questions that we get. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? How much is good enough? And we don't look at just the shoreline as well, because lake protection is more than just picking up your pet waste. It's more than not using phosphorus-based fertilizer. It's more than just having a few plants at the shoreline. And what we want to do is look at all aspects, and we have these 4 different zones. We look at the lake, what are you doing within the lake? The shoreline, the buffer zone, which is 35 feet from the top of the lake bank back towards your house. And then the rest of the property, however big or small it is your upland zone. We do have questions that are weighted. As you